Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Golden Shovel Agency's January Expert Webinar. My name is Joni Anderson, and I am the Client Account Manager for Golden Shovel Agency, and I will be helping Brian out with the webinar today. Just so you know, this is a re-recording as we ran into some technical errors with our previous video, but Brian and I think that it will actually be beneficial to you as it will allow him to present a more dynamic of his tools that he has available. All right, let's get started. Our presenter is Brian Hansen. Brian will be presenting on marketing communities in the 21st century like you mean it. Brian Hansen is a 25-year-old lifetime learner. He has lived in Asia for over 5 years, working independently for the government, for business organizations, aiding them in their goal of growth. For the past 2 years, Brian has been focusing on economic development here in the United States. His passions include technology application, marketing, consumer psychology, and spoiling his soon-to-be wife. In spite of being young, he has a rich past of helping organizations grow. While working for an organization in Mongolia, Brian increased pre-qualified lead generation by over 1,000%. In Taiwan, he helped a private school increase enrollment by 150%. And here in the United States, he has aided a number of economic development organizations rediscover their communities through more effective marketing. Thanks for taking the time, twice now, to present to us, Brian. We are happy to have you. Take it away.
Hi, Joni. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you again for giving me the opportunity to re-record this meeting and get it out. Welcome everyone again. I'm excited to be able to present to all of you, and I'm here to talk to you, as Joni said, about effectively marketing our communities with today's technology. I work with the company Mappentor, who for 2 years running has won Best New Media at the International Economic Development Council. It's been awarded the Best Small Business Award from the Michigan Small Business and Technology Development Center in 2012, and it's a great little piece of technology that I'd love to share with you guys a little bit later. I'd like to talk a little bit about how marketing has changed, how it continues to change, and a couple of terms, a couple of marketing concepts that really apply to where marketing is going, the idea of experience and the idea of presence. And then I'd talk a little bit about our technology at Mappentor and how it can help economic development organizations reach their goals. As well, for this discussion, I'd like to assume two things. First of all, I'd like to assume that we can think about our communities as a product, and that we as economic developers are targeting the audience, our consumers, if you will, be they site selectors or site consultants or business development experts, whoever we might be trying to get our message out to. So we've got our product and we've got our target consumer. So as we talk about products and consumers, obviously we're not really talking about retail goods. We're talking about economic development in the very core of the industry, building value in your product, building value in your community. So on that note, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about some ineffective kinds of marketing. There are a number of dangerous pitfalls, if you will, that we don't want to run into, and we've seen some examples of people and organizations and industries running into these pitfalls in the past. And as the saying goes, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Well, history tells us that consumers are changing and that we need to change as well, and that's a continuous process. As your audience matures and adapts, we need to accommodate them. And so, as we know, things are changing. We as human beings are given more and more choices in an ever-growing economy and a more global economy, and of course we're getting less and less time. Site selectors and location consultants included. The way we cope with this, and the way anyone would cope with this, is we begin to ignore things, or we begin to pay more attention to things that we care about and give less attention to things that we simply just don't have the time for. In fact, Seth Godin, a widely acclaimed marketing genius of our generation, points out a few interesting points about information overload and marketing. He explains first what he calls the TV industrial complex, and I'll outline this for you. Essentially, the idea is this. You buy some advertisements, and the advertisements make sure people notice you, and they give you more distribution. And when you get more distribution, your product reaches further, and you're able to make more sales. And more sales, of course, gives you more money that you can take and put it back into buying more ads and do the whole process over and over and over again. Well, we know that the TV industrial complex was canceled. People just simply stopped paying attention to mass media and those kinds of advertising campaigns, and I think the vast majority of us would agree that they're widely ineffective. The TV industrial complex was thrown out because of disruptive technology. This technology was invented that gave consumers back some of their time. The TV industrial complex would force consumers to sit through commercials and essentially force-feed them advertising. Now through TiVo or similar technologies, or Netflix or streaming TV, or even satellite radio, they could skip the commercials altogether and they could move on to content that was relevant to them. And they could move on to the content that they thought was important. The same thing has happened essentially with the internet and printed media. This is the front landing page of the New York Times, and believe it or not, on this page alone, there are 22 advertisements. We're only seeing 5 in this screenshot. But over the course of the whole front page of the New York Times, there are 22 ads, carefully crafted to interrupt the readers and catch their attention. Well, something that's interesting is we as consumers are seeking ways of getting more and more time back and, filtering through more and more of this information overload. And so there are tools out there that will delete every single one of these advertisements on this page. I can come to the New York Times and not once see a single advertisement that their partners pay so dearly to have put on that page. Perhaps more impressive than the fact that these tools exist is that nearly 8% of the American population uses some form of these tools. So YouTube commercials, Netflix commercials, website banners, all of them are gone. 8% of Americans are consciously choosing not just to ignore every single one of these messages, but to never have them shown. One more interesting point, and then we'll start talking about why all of this matters to us as economic developers. This graph, to me, is perhaps one of the most interesting graphs I've ever seen. It's essentially a heat map of where users look at a web page. And so you can see on these graphs, there's 3 different web pages separated by white lines. And on each web page, the red areas are areas that users spent a vast majority of their time reading and looking at, and they had a lot of time dwelling on those areas. The yellow areas received a little less attention, and the blue areas received very little, leaving gray areas with no attention given. Now, you'll see in red boxes, I've highlighted each of the advertisements, and you'll also notice a conspicuous absence of any color in those areas. So Darren Hammer, the managing director of the organization that ran this research, stated this: "The implications of this study mean that in the best case scenario, 44% of advertising spending is wasted on impressions that never reach the consumer's eyes. Worst case scenario, as much as 93% of impressions are going unseen." Another interesting aspect of this research pointed out that this idea, this behavior that they've called banner blindness, where we ignore banners, applies not just to websites and online content, it applies to the world in general. So even if we aren't posting banners on websites, we as economic developers can bet the same behaviors of reading and information consumption apply to inboxes, pamphlets, brochures, magazines, and basically any other medium we might be using to reach out to our audiences. In other words, what does this all mean? Well, in the words of Russell Riblett, GIS Planning's Director of Sales, business as usual equals ruin. So how can we combat the business as usual strategy? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to understand the concept of commoditization. Commoditization is a marketing term where essentially products and services become valued less and less until the point where they're essentially valued at the same level as a commodity. So an example of this would be if I start growing coffee beans and I'm making money and a lot of other people come into this industry, I need to start doing something special to make myself different. And so what I do is I take those coffee beans and now I process them and I refine it into a product. I have coffee grinds. And so essentially over time the same thing is going to happen. I'm in this industry, I've refined my product and I have something different, but everyone else is going to see me making money, and so they start coming into the industry And this coffee grind, this product which was different from the commodity or the coffee beans, in the eyes of consumers becomes valued less and less until it becomes more and more like a commodity. Now you combat commoditization by again refining a product into the next stage where it's a service stage. Well, again, over time it becomes valued less and less and becomes more and more of a commodity. But we could go beyond this. In the coffee industry, we could do more than growing coffee, grinding it up, sticking it in a simple brewing machine, and pouring it in a cup. And this fourth stage is where we combat the business as usual mentality. The fourth stage is what we call experiential marketing. An experience product is where all of these other steps are taken. You take the coffee grinds, you brew them, but you provide something else on top. The extra mile that causes your consumers to say, wow. And through this process, a memory is born. So, in our analogy of coffee, it would be a cafe where you go, have intellectual conversations with like-minded people. You make new friends, listen to beatniks recite their poetry. And above everything else, there's an atmosphere. There's some element that makes this whole experience less about drinking coffee out of necessity and more about experiencing the coffee and the cafe as a whole as its own simple pleasure. Starbucks took what was a simple matter of getting your daily coffee and turned it into an experience. When you buy a new Lexus, they have a representative in-house available to answer every question about your car for you. They've gone beyond just selling cars. They've gone beyond just selling luxury cars, and they've even gone beyond providing good service, and they've begun offering remarkable service. We as EDOs can do the same. Everyone else can be selling coffee beans, but we need to be a cafe. So how do we lift ourselves from being coffee beans into being a cafe? By being remarkable. That's a really interesting word, and I like to think about that word remarkable. It is the complete antithesis of simple, of common and normal, the words that define coffee beans as a commodity. Remarkable is something much more. It comes from French, and I'm not going to pretend to know exactly how to pronounce those words, but it breaks down to mean essentially something worth making a remark about, something worth taking note of. And I'd like to share two stories about being remarkable with all of you. First is the story of a purple house in my hometown where I grew up, and second is a personal story from my travels abroad. It's a story I like to call the parable of the pristine restrooms, which I'll share with you in a moment. So growing up, along the road from my community to the one next door, there was a cottage house, not dissimilar from this one. A cottage house where you would drive by and otherwise you would never ever notice it, except for one thing. And it was one very simple thing, very minor, that this family had done to make their home essentially a landmark of our community. And that simple thing was by painting the outside of their home purple. Now, as people drove by, they would always, without fail, turn their head and say, "What on earth is that purple house?" And it was eye-popping, and it was catching, and it was remarkable because it was different. And different was something that they embraced. When I was traveling through Taiwan, I passed through a very small community. It was in the middle of nowhere, and I mean literally nowhere. The only thing remarkable about this city was that it was completely and utterly unremarkable. People here in the United States joke about growing up in a community so small that they only have one stoplight. Well, this community didn't even have that. Anyway, I was traveling through this village and was looking for somewhere to stop for some directions, and I turned down an unmarked alley, rounded a few corners, and what I had previously thought was a ghost town exploded into a bustling market with all kinds of vendors and businesses everywhere, and it completely blindsided me. From all the outward appearances, this community looked like it had nothing to offer. So, out of curiosity, I parked my motorcycle and I asked one of the many vendors in the area why there were so many people. And he pointed across the road and told me in Chinese. He said, "Go and check out the bathrooms across the road." And of course that left me a little bit bewildered. So I look across the road where he's pointing, and I see this building, like a giant horn sticking out of the earth. And I assumed it was what he was pointing at, and I began crossing the street, and it was about halfway across the street that it dawned on me that this guy was pointing out at a bathroom like it was something special. And trust me, I've been to a number of Chinese restrooms at this point, and they were nothing to be impressed by. So naturally, my first thought was, there is no possible way I understood that man correctly. I must have misunderstood, because my Chinese is still pretty bad. Well, I walk into this building, and I see this pristine restroom. Marble floors, marble walls, waterfall, groomed plants, fountains. I mean, the whole thing smelled like roses. You probably could have eaten off the floor. Anyway, immediately after I walk in, the thing just starts filling up. Tourist after tourist after tourist just walks in, starts taking all kinds of pictures, and quickly I realized I did understand this vendor correctly, and as ridiculous as it sounded, this community was, as a matter of fact, famous for its bathrooms. The sheer quality of these public restrooms nearly floored me, and I walked out and back into the market. I turned to my right, and I see there's a decently sized parking lot full of tour buses with tons of tourists getting off to come see these restrooms. I mean, this village didn't even have a placard as I drove in naming the community. I doubt it still has a name. But big or small, this village realized something crucially important. Along this blue path from the city in the south to the city in the north, among all of the nameless and small communities along that route, they had to lift themselves out of obscurity and be remarkable. And here I am 9 years later, remarking about them to you. They were able, with nothing more than a few stalls of public latrines, to lift themselves from obscurity and make themselves something special. What was otherwise an obscure, dead, and economically stunted area, because of these restrooms and because of their ability to be remarkable, became a thriving oasis of business thanks to them. So the question is then, how are we remarkable? How can we become remarkable if we're already not? Well, thankfully I'm not suggesting building public restrooms for anyone. But what does it mean to us? Well, most communities along this route between those two cities, along that blue path, were trying to do this. They were trying to market to the middle. And this is the perfect area if you want to target people just like the mass marketing area, or the TV industrial complex. But the problem with marketing here is that people in the center of the bell curve have already made their purchasing decisions. They've already been affected by outside influences. The small little town knew one thing. The people on those tour buses didn't care about hotels, they didn't care about gift shops and small trinkets to take home. After being on a bus for that many hours, they cared about one thing, and they cared very passionately about it. They cared about restrooms. And the first step to being remarkable is talking to people who care. If you can catch their attention and give them an experience when they're expecting something much less, they're going to make remarks. I want to reiterate, these are points that I'm not just coming up with on my own. Industry leaders in the economic development industry have already pointed these facts out. They have said that current marketing strategy is slipping in effectiveness. They have pointed out that there are better ways to reach out. And they have even said that updated and innovating solutions are the key, not a doubling down on the status quo. The economic development industry is demanding service, but what we want to do to be remarkable is give them an experience. One last example of being remarkable and its effect on the bottom line. As a business finance major, I love numbers and I love statistics. And for this example, I know I'm likely talking to the wrong demographic. Video game consoles are probably not going to be a relevant example, at least at first. But let me explain what Nintendo did, and I think you'll understand the point that I'm trying to illustrate. First, I'll introduce you to two of the long-running powerhouses in the video game industry. First, the Xbox, which is developed by Microsoft, and then you have the PlayStation 3 developed by Sony. These two video game consoles have been widely considered the leaders in the video game industry for a number of years, the 800-pound gorillas, if you will. But there's a third company that's most often overlooked, who had a very distinct heritage, but in recent years had began to wane in comparison to these other two companies. And that would be the Nintendo. Nintendo realized pretty quickly, just like us for EDOs, that the business as usual equals ruin mantra was completely true. So Nintendo, in the midst of slumping sales, decided to do something about it. They made a video game system which in nearly every single aspect is inferior to the PlayStation and Xbox. Again, this is critical. The Nintendo Wii cannot and never will perform as well as the Xbox and the PlayStation according to graphics, according to speed, and according to features. But there is one thing that the Nintendo Wii does differently. Its remarkableness. It provides an experience. So what Nintendo did to be remarkable was they took a video game system where you didn't just sit on a couch mashing your thumbs into a piece of plastic. They made a system where you stood up, jumped, flailed your arms, danced all kinds of crazy moves, and it was new, it was different, and people talked about it. And the bottom line of Nintendo being remarkable and being different was this graph. The red line we see over on the left is initial sales, and over on the right-hand side is in 2007, where Nintendo's sales were skyrocketing. And at this very point in the graph, the PlayStation 3 was even losing money on every unit that it sold. This very clearly delineates the importance of being remarkable and giving people experiences. So now that we know that traditional marketing isn't as effective as it could be, and we know that we need to provide someone with an experience, how do we do that? Well, we build value through presence. And presence is a new word that's kind of been coined by marketing researchers recently within the last few years. And to illustrate the concept of presence, I'll just give you this example using an iPad. Let's say we're in the market to buy an iPad, okay, and there's 3 websites, A, B, and C. And website A has nothing more than words describing the iPad. It says, an iPad weighs so many pounds, it's this color, you can push this button, you can type stuff on it, and that's about all that the website has. Now website B has much, much more to offer. Website B has the words describing the iPad, but accompanying that text, website B has photos and videos where you can see people playing with the iPad or using it for work, or you see people flying on an airplane, getting things done, reading magazines, and you can zoom in and see all the fine details. Much, much better experience. Website C takes it somewhere completely different, and they actually allow people to interact with the iPad before they ever purchase or touch or see it. And they do that through this medium. Just like website A and B, they have the words and the photos and the videos, but additionally to everything else, they have a 3D model of the iPad which users can rotate and spin around, and they can click the home button and it'll turn on the screen kind of thing. Now all other things being equal, the price and the model of the iPad, I think that just about every single one of us would be most likely to purchase from website C. And the reason for that is this concept of presence. In fact, research run in 2007 said this about presence. Presenting a vivid product description is crucial when consumers are asked to imagine their future experience with the product, or in our case, a community. Without a vivid community depiction, imagery appeals may not only be ineffective, but they can decrease the persuasiveness of the message. In other words, if we're not using presence as economic developers, if we're not letting people interact with our communities before they ever set foot there, we are being not only ineffective, but we are actually deterring people from considering us. Mapintor uses a number of technologies to build presence, to provide your website's visitors not just with information, but an experience. And key among those technologies is the use of 3D interactive environments. It immerses users and captures them. In fact, our technology is so engaging, we have seen bounce rates as low as 26%. We have smooth flyovers, and there's content management where you as EDOs can put in anything that you see fit and tell your story however you need to tell it. You can set it up so engaging stories unfold as users interact with your community. And so our job is to take the information site selectors want and build an immersive experience around it. Build an experience that will capture them and engage them and keep them coming back. We want to build an experience that's remarkable. So I'm going to show you a little bit and talk about how Mappentor can directly influence 4 of the top 7 areas that affect site selectors' final decisions as outlined by Atlas in a white paper they released. The first point that we directly influence is the third-party national data. I'll show you a quick video of how our technology interacts with GIS websites and GIS systems. This is Chippewa County, Wisconsin's website, and as you can see, Mappentor flies down into the community and gives you a little more realistic feel for how things work and gives you some context and relevance of these locations and available properties within the community as a whole. Now, this user here is finding a property that looks interesting, clicks on the link, and is immediately sent over to the demographic website data in the GIS system. Mappentor, on one side of the coin, providing the quality of life and presence aspects of the community, and then the GIS system on the other side of that same coin, providing the analytical and objective and statistical information about the community. Besides just linking to GIS systems, Mappentor has the ability to embed a wide variety of rich content. Among that content is included links to external data. And so as we see in this location here, there's an interactive live chart. And as that information is updated in a third-party source, it's also immediately reflected right here within Mappentor. Besides embedding inside of locations, we can also put photos and demographic data right on top of the map, just as you're seeing these graphs here. Familiarization tours were identified as one of the other top key criteria for site selectors by this Atlas white paper. Now Mappentor takes it a step further, and again, applying that concept of presence and experience and being remarkable, we take familiarization tours and turn them into something 3D and virtual and interactive. The Journal of Consumer Research said this about these technologies: if users are allowed to interact with the product, they will be more likely to purchase than if they just read or are told about it. And because of this, Mappentor becomes so powerful. We're able to take your website's visitors and transport them into your community, being able to drive them to key locations, being able to show them the stories that you think are important. As Chippewa County, Wisconsin has done, they've flown over one of their business parks, and they've outlined the relevance of this business park within their community, outlining available utilities, transportation and logistics, and also a number of other benefits to this area as they show the location to the people that are visiting the site. Without ever setting foot within Chippewa County, Wisconsin, users of this website are able to not just see it, but feel like they've been there. Additionally, we have mobile access to all of these features. Essentially, everything we've outlined here is a one-to-one comparison between the online web experience on the desktop or laptop and the mobile devices. Mappentor's use of 360-degree panoramas is an excellent example of presence. As you see my phone right here, all I'm doing is holding my phone up, spinning in my chair, tilting it down, and as I move this phone, that viewport within the phone actually changes and makes me feel like I'm in a different location. You can show available properties, available warehousing facilities, manufacturing plants, future developments. The possibilities here are honestly endless. The third and fourth key buying criteria the Atlas white paper outlined as critical for site selectors was websites and news. Imagine taking a static website such as this with a map and turning it into something as powerful and robust as we've seen with Mappentor. Being able to consolidate all of your different content and multimedia and marketing messages into one location where users can interact with data and see that data and that location's importance and relevance within the community. You can show future developments, outline events, historical trails, bike races, literally anything could be outlined here. So as we've seen, Map and Tour clearly and directly affects 4 of the top 6 purchasing criteria. Now, talking again about presence, if we bear in mind the effects of presence on positive branding and brand equity in your community, it could be strongly argued, in fact research has also shown, that Map and Tour type technology will even indirectly influence the remaining 3 criteria of site selection. Map and Tour again provides not just desktop and website interfaces for this content. Through use of mobile technologies, we heighten the concept of presence and experience to build your brand even further, giving you professional interfaces, driving visitors to websites, businesses, content, and all the while engaging them in a meaningful way. Engaged users are informed users, and engaged users are more likely to buy. Again, with more research on presence, the easier and more vividly individuals can envision a scenario, the higher their likelihood estimates that the scenario will occur. In other words, using technologies such as Map and Tour will not only make you remarkable, but they will provide your community that presence that is so absolutely critical to effective online marketing in today's world. At the very least, I think we can all agree that having a website with a tool as robust and powerful as Map and Tour will get people talking. And again, citing the white paper released by Atlas, even if you don't win the deal, your organization's average projected result per meaningful conversation is 25 jobs and $6.6 million in capital investment. Isn't that worth being remarkable for? Here at Map and Tour, we're eager and happy to help you as EDOs market and reach your potential. We would be more than happy to have conversations regarding Map and Tour and how we might be able to help you meet your goals. More information is available online at our website, mapandtour.com. And for additional questions and any other information, please call Denny at area code 989-493-5147 or reach her at denny@mapandtour.com. Thank you very much, everyone. I do appreciate you taking the time, and Joni, again, I appreciate the opportunity to re-record this demonstration, and I look forward to having a lot of meaningful conversations with our audience out there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Brian, for that presentation. On behalf of Golden Shovel Agency, we hope that this webinar has been very helpful to all of you that have taken the time to listen in. If you have any questions about this or other webinars we have done in the past, please don't hesitate to contact me. My email address is janderson@goldenshovelagency.com. Again, that's janderson@goldenshovelagency.com. Thanks again, Brian. We really appreciate you taking the time to help us out. And thank you to everyone else. Have a great day.